So let's talk about Antarctica. You know, that giant, mysterious continent at the very bottom of the world, governed by this really unique international treaty. But it brings up this really big question, one we're going to try and answer today. Does anyone actually live there?
I mean, think about it. Antarctica is really the last great unknown on our planet. We've mapped pretty much everywhere else, right? But this place, it's still this huge, icy question mark.
And that's what brings us to the big one, the core question we're tackling here. Does anyone really live in Antarctica? Now, you might think it's a simple yes or no, but trust me, the real answer is way more complicated and honestly, a lot more interesting.
And look, to even get close to an answer, we have to dig into a bunch of other questions first. Like, is it even a country? Why in the world would anyone have babies there? Seriously, and how did we only discover this massive place just a couple of centuries ago?
Okay, so why is this all so complicated? Well, it really all starts with the continent itself. And let me just say, putting it mildly, Antarctica is not a friendly place.
Just check out the numbers here. We're talking about a continent that's bigger than Europe and Australia combined. It's also, by a long shot, the coldest, the driest, yep, it's technically a desert, and the windiest place on the whole planet. Just wow.
And you really get a sense of how isolated it is when you compare it to the North Pole, right? The Arctic, that's mostly just frozen ocean. People have been around there for something like 50,000 years. But Antarctica, that's a real deal land continent. And the first time a human even saw it was only about 200 years ago. That's crazy.
And just so we're all on the same page, let's get this out of the way right now. Once and for all, no. Polar bears. Got it? Good.
So, if this place is so brutal and we only found it so recently, how did we even get to the point where people are there at all? Well, it was a very, very slow process.
You know, the funny thing is, the idea of Antarctica has been around forever. The ancient Greeks were theorizing about an Antarctic way back in the 2nd century. By the 1400s, map makers were just kind of drawing a southern land on their maps, totally guessing. But it took until 1819 for anyone to actually lay eyes on it. And then another 80 years just to build the first couple of huts. The oldest settlement that's been there year-round? Only since 1904.
All right, so that's the history. But what about today? What's life actually like for the folks who are down there right now? You might be surprised.
Get this number, 1,258. Now that's not the population of the entire continent, nope. That's how many people can live at just one base, the American McMurdo Station. And it's basically a small frozen city.
And we're not talking about a few tents here. McMurdo has over 85 buildings, its own harbor, an airport, a coffee shop, a store, even 2 ATMs. And to get through those long, dark winters, they've got 3 bars and, this is my favorite part, apparently a ton of costume parties.
Living there means taking some pretty extreme precautions, too. There's at least one civilian base where you have to get your appendix taken out before you can move there, a mandatory appendectomy. Why? Well, think about it. If that thing bursts in the dead of winter, getting a medical flight out is pretty much impossible.
Okay, so you've got thousands of people from all these different countries, all living on this one frozen continent. How does that not just descend into chaos? The answer is this really fascinating mix of global cooperation and just a little bit of quiet competition.
This is all thanks to something called the Antarctic Treaty. Signed back in 1961, this thing is honestly one of the most successful international agreements ever. It basically says Antarctica is for science only, no military stuff allowed. And all those arguments about who owns what piece, yeah, we're putting all of that on hold, literally putting the claims on ice.
As of today, 54 countries have signed on, and that covers more than 80% of the world's population. You've got 7 nations that have these old claims to territory, but they work right alongside 47 other countries that don't. And get this, it's the only continent on Earth that has never had a war.
But don't get me wrong, those 7 countries are definitely keeping their claims warm.
The source material had this perfect line for it. Because the claims are all drawn like pizza slices pointing to the South Pole, the map looks like an artisan pie. It's so weird it technically makes Norway and Australia neighbors.
And this quiet competition, it can get really weird. Like, back in 1977, Argentina wanted to strengthen its claim. So what did they do? They flew a pregnant woman to their base just so she could have the first baby ever born in Antarctica. Wild, right? Well, not to be outdone, their rivals in Chile sent a married couple down there with the specific goal of having the first baby conceived on the continent. I'm not making this up.
Okay, so after all that, the crazy cold, the weird history, the bars, the international treaties, the baby race, let's circle all the way back to where we started. Do people actually live there?
So let's look at the arguments. In the yes column, you've got up to 5,000 people there at any given time. There are settlements that are occupied all year round. There are families, bars, even babies being born. That sounds a lot like living somewhere, right? But then in the no column, you have most experts saying the population isn't permanent, it's constantly changing. Everyone, even the families, is there for a very specific temporary job. They're not just setting up a new life.
So here's what we know for sure. There's enough going on down there to support 70 different settlements. It's all managed by this massive international treaty. And, yes, one last time for the people in the back, still no polar bears.
You know, when you lay it all out, it kind of sounds like people do live there, even if it's not what we normally think of as living somewhere. So now that you've heard all the evidence, I'm going to turn the final question back to you. What do you think?